You're listening to KRUULP 100.1 FM, the voice of Fairfield, Iowa, and beyond, the Midwest's only solar-powered radio station. My show is Speaking Freely. My name is Dennis Raimondi. I am also found as a podcast at Dennis, DENNIS.TV. I have about 500 shows archived there. My guest today from Stockholm, Sweden, Joanna Alm. She is managing director at Drop Coffee in Stockholm, which she founded in 2010. For the last 3 years, Joanna has represented Sweden in the World Coffee Roasting Championship. In 2014, she placed third. In 2015, second. In 2016, fourth. And I should let my listeners know, I do a lot of stuff on politics. I have passions in different areas. But really what I'm feeling passion for these days is coffee. I love coffee. I'm learning as much as I can about it. My wife and I travel a lot, probably in the last 6 months in the States and in Europe. I'm actually in Gothenburg, Sweden right now. We visited maybe 120 cafes. In Scandinavia, I've talked to a lot of baristas, and everybody said to me, speak to Joanna Alm. She is the one of the top roasters in the world, and you can learn a lot from her. And I should say, Joanna, I went to Drop Coffee 2 years ago. The last time I was in Stockholm. It was absolutely fabulous. If you're anywhere near Stockholm, you must go there. Joanna, thank you so much for taking the time to come on today.
Thank you so much, Dennis. It's a
Uh,
great introduction. Thank you.
yeah. Well, I wanted to start at the beginning. Do you remember the first time you had a cup of coffee? What your initial introduction to coffee was in your own life?
I do remember drinking a lot of coffee in my teenage years. Like that's what we did, like the whole fika culture, and like yeah, that's what we do. You have
Explain to our listeners who are not from Sweden, who are not Scandinavian, what fika, Fika, what that word refers to.
yeah. So it both is subjective, but it's a verb. So it literally is that you are like it's both the actual like coffee and bun that you might have, but it also is like the social thing of enjoying a coffee together. So, and I think that like the coffee culture in Sweden is so strong. First of all, like we drink pots and liters of water of coffee at home, and like every time, like no matter what occasion there is, we are going out to have coffee,
Right.
and this we call to have a fika.
Yeah, my wife is from Gothenburg, so I spend time in Sweden. I have for the last 10 years. And
Ah,
I did a little bit of research, and Swedes consume more coffee per capita than any country in the world. Norway is right up there with them. And so you have a very long-term coffee culture here. I wanted to also ask, when you first got into it more seriously, I think you were only 19, you were young, you were looking for a job, and you got a job as a barista, is that right?
yeah, it's kind of true. Like, so say, like when I was a teenager, I was drinking heaps of coffee. I had even a lot of cafe jobs, and I remember this so well. Like when I was going from preparing pre-grinded coffee compared to when we were actually starting to grinding the coffee. And I
Right.
stayed in like the service business. I was studying for nurse as well, but then I had the opportunity in Norway to run a coffee bar, and I was going to reopen it together with an architect, and everything. Like we were just like so naive and like all the blue eyes, and just like yes, we are going to do the best coffee in town. So then I actually Googled and I found Tim Wendelbo that were had just started up and started to supply his coffee.
Wow. Yeah,
And
Tim's been a guest on my show, and that was a year ago. And since then, I've learned as much as I could more about coffee. And boy, it's like learning about wine or whatever. There's so much to it. One of the things I want to do is educate our listeners, and there's a lot to coffee. I always liked coffee, but about 8, 9 years ago, my daughter moved to Portland, Oregon, and when I visited her there, I went to Stumptown Coffee and at the Ace Hotel there, and I got to talking to a lot of folks from Portland, and they took their coffee very, very seriously, and they started talking, throwing terminology out to me like single origin and roasting and dark roast and light roast and flavors and whatnot, and so it deepened my understanding and also my appreciation, and it made me seek out the best coffee. You're one of the best top coffee roasters in the world, no question about it. But by the time I get my coffee, from the time it all starts, there's a lot involved. A lot can be done to screw it up at any point, way before the barista or whatever. So take us on this journey a little bit. Talk to us first about sourcing the coffee beans. What's that like? Where do you go? How do you make those decisions? Start there, and we'll go from there to actually drinking a cup of coffee.
Mm. No, I think you're so right. Like I was going to say that earlier, but like my everything, like no matter, you can meet a barista talking so much and passionate about it, but if you can't really reflect to it in the cup yourself, like just like you're saying, then it's like, okay, like that sounds good, but it doesn't attach you. My first cup like that was a Kenyan coffee, and like to get the knowledge about the many people delivering to the cooperative of the highland about a very specific acidity, almost like Coca-Cola, like phosphoric it's called. You can feel it like in your gums. And I remember that so well when it tasted like black currant, and it was just like a door opener, like this is what coffee can be. So like, but like behind, so that I recommend everyone to just like order home different origins, different roasteries, like all of that, to be able to translate the taste and the knowledge to something new and start to get knowledge. But yes, very much what I do is that I used to work with very many countries, maybe 10 different origins, and just like, I'm going to find the best coffee. It's only me traveling, and it's a lot of journeys. And I started to instead focusing mainly on 5 countries where I'm being more involved and visit all of our producers every year, like only buying coffee from them and get like a bigger grasp of how it's working.
Joanna, what could I ask? What the? I believe I read it was 3 countries in South and Central America and 2 in Africa. Is that right? Which are the countries?
So our focus countries is Ethiopia, it's Kenya, El Salvador, Bolivia, and Costa Rica. We just started working with. I'm also working with like 1 farm in Guatemala, but that I don't count. I should probably add that as well. So, and it's also different. Like think about not only the environment and the quality and the social aspect, and like what are the working conditions, what are they paid, like all of this. Is there any, are you increasing or decreasing corruption by doing this, and like all of this. Like it's so generally like poor countries that you're working with, and like it's so much built on the whole like colony system from the beginning. So it's a lot of like borders and things and new structures that needs to be made. So it's very interesting. Like
is this what people refer to when they say fair trade?
I think fair trade, like the logo per se, have been very, very established and something many rely on. But to trade something fairly, absolutely. Like I think that's more or less every specialty coffee roaster and many other roasters, of course, wish to do. Like if you go and travel there and you see what it is, and you are actually, everything that this is the one coffee you want to buy. Of course, you want it to be done fairly, but it also is like so much more open that you actually can do than just to go there and buy the coffee.
For those just tuning in, you're listening to KRUULP 100.1 FM. My name is Dennis Raimondi. My guest today, world champion, competitor 3 years in a row for this country of Sweden in the world coffee roasting championships, Joanna Alm. Joanna, one of the things that I've been hearing a lot lately, and I got introduced to this concept a few years ago, is single origin. When I go into a coffee shop, oftentimes they'll have a blend, but I've noticed the more sophisticated drinkers will also seek out single origin. Tell us about that.
Yeah, like for me, it almost is like a statement, like what I wish to communicate, that I don't want to blend different coffees. Can a coffee be equally tasty? Yeah, most likely, like if you're good at it, you can probably make them at least very good. But how I think like the background in blends are also like how they have been used is a little like, oh, this is going to be an espresso blend where you actually maybe roast the coffee darker, or you're trying to hide away some coffees that are getting old, that are too long after harvest, for example. So it's rarely that you put your very high-end coffees into blends. Mm-hmm. But even if you do that, like you imagine that you could do a super tasty blend. But say if I'm marketing a coffee and presenting a coffee to you, take the Kenyan example that we had, like you wouldn't be able to refer to that coffee as origin, to where it's coming from, if I blended two coffees.
Right. So if I go into Drop Coffee, I'm going to get a single origin
yes.
coffee.
Yes, all the way. We haven't blended since 2010. Right. So I remember visiting one producer I visited, and we talked about blends, and I talked about doing one of his coffees as a blend. And he was just like, there I had been standing and talking about, like, oh, the cherries should be so ripe, and, trying to, like, with my young knowledge, trying to say, like, yeah, we were aiming for quality and we were ready to pay for it and start working together and all of this. And he just looked at me and like, but you're blending my coffee? Like, you need to mix with something else. Right. Like, why don't you just let this coffee shine and make it unique?
Right. That for our listeners, I mean, that would be like, I guess, getting the finest grapes from Napa Valley in California and then blending them with some cheap grapes from Michigan or something, or not to denigrate Michigan's grapes, they have good grapes there too, but that happens in a blend. So we have single origin, and when you say single origin, does that mean one country, one farm, one group of farms? How do they define single origin?
Like as much as possible, I would say. Like, so on the level, say like when it is maybe say it's a 2-hectare farm in El Salvador, where I'm exclusively buying all the coffee from, one single origin can actually be like from that very farm. We can still have like different lots in the farm. We can have different varietals, like all of these. Like the more you can separate, the more, if you actually like not only can taste the farm, but you can taste the different varieties separated. So a single origin can be like, it's what you want. Like, I guess the saying is like, at least, from one farm, but with some cooperatives. And so it's, of course, is coffee delivered from one area to one plot.
And it's also my understanding, Joanna, that, and people talk about this, the lighter and darker roast, that when you get a darker roast, you're tasting more the roast. And often, and I think you mentioned this, if you want to hide some bad beans, roast them dark. But if you really want to get the taste of the beans, it's a lighter roast. It's more acidic, but the flavors of the bean come out more. So what I'm going to guess is that if I come to Drop Coffee, it's going to tend to be a milder or lighter roast. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. So the whole idea, like, that being said, I think it's a personal preference as well, that some can like coffee a bit darker than what I roast it as well, like what my preference is. But it's absolutely, like, we are like, talk about Scandinavia, we are eating all of the acidic berries. Like, we very much like grew up on acidity, and like it's what I dig in whatever I eat. I'm searching for acidity, I'm searching for clarity, I'm searching for berryness, and so. But with that said, like, I can absolutely understand that, like, there are different ways that you can appreciate a cup. But my vision of what I'm trying to do is just like to present, say we go out with sauce, with meat, we're really trying to present and find those amazing coffees that, like, it's something when you see it, how hard they are working, how hard they keep on improving, and how much you are investing in it and they are investing in it. Like, you just want to present the cup as beautiful as you possibly can.
Right.
Say, imagine if we're buying a coffee that is, in theory, like, not having any bad flavors. Then we would only like to try to enhance all of those like lovely flavors that we got them, and like get it all like clear and naked, and like this is it, this is what you have. So, and that being said, like I think it's very rarely that you manage to present all the potential of a cup, and that's like consistently like trying to tweak, to experiment, like try out more consistently, updating your roast profile, and yeah, never
Wow.
settle down.
So much to it. Now, Southern Europe, Italy, do they tend to use darker roasts?
Yeah, very much.
So very much so. It's the lighter roast. And I know, there's a term that I would like you to explain to me and to our listeners, and that is when I was doing some research on coffee and visiting different cafes in the States, they talked about this is the third wave. I said, explain that to me. So they said, well, the first wave was just people used to buy coffee wherever. Then Starbucks came along and the quality went up a little bit, but it was a very dark roast. And then maybe 10, 15 years ago, 12 years ago, maybe it was in the States anyway, it might have been Stumptown or whatever. They started doing more single origin and really refining what coffee was and getting the deep flavors out of it and so on and so forth. Uh, Explain to us what third wave coffee is, and is the same case, the same sequence in Europe that it has been in the States?
Mm. Um, I mean, I think the waves are good in explaining in one way, but it feels like we have been like on the way out from third wave for a
Yeah,
long
which
time.
fourth
With
wave?
yeah, but it absolutely is what you're mentioning. Like to be able, like, is a coffee full is sourceable? Could you tell exactly where it's been coming from? Are you on a level to 0 to 100, are you actually presenting it like over 85% as a roast, 85 points as a roasted coffee? Are are you working with freshness in coffee? Are you working with, um, not maybe pre-grinding if yeah, that's not a good thing. But um, all of these things together and just like try to maximize the very flavor of the green coffee you've been buying. That's very much third wave.
Hmm.
And I think it was like, at least talking about Scandinavia, it was many of us like, oh, that one in that garage and that little place at Södermalm, the southern part of town where we are located. It's just like people were just looking at us when we're standing there hand brewing. And it was a very rare thing. Like, why do you do that? Everyone has a batch brewer at home. That
Uh-huh.
is what we do in the countryside, But it was seen so much as a geekiness. But something happened when this, like, now is starting to be scaled up, and that you see that the bigger industries as well are starting to take on a specialty coffee selection,
Wow.
and the bigger restaurants and cafes also want to offer what's
Right.
considered as.
Yeah, I mean, I think the consumer is becoming more educated. Hopefully, the show will help that, and then people are seeking the better product. And I want
Mm.
to also mention that you have a wonderful website that has a lot of this information that people can go to. It's I have dropcoffee.com, just dropcoffee.com. Go to that website, read about it, and find out, in greater detail about many of the areas Joanna's speaking about. For those just tuning in, you're listening to KRUULP 100.1 FM. My name is Dennis Raimondi. My guest today, Joanna Alm, world-class coffee roaster, and I would imagine barista, and on every level, an expert and champion of coffee and the coffee culture, which I think at one time you could only really find in certain spots in Europe, but now is also growing into the U.S. and Asia and other parts of the world. One question: in addition to somebody going to a cafe and getting a wonderful espresso or cappuccino or whatever they might get there, a lot of people drink coffee at home as well. And I noticed on your website that you are hosting the world champion AeroPress competition, and I just want to say that every day I go to at least one cafe, but at night I have this strange habit of drinking coffee before I go to bed. I'll get some very good beans and I'll use the AeroPress, which I started. I'm not ready to go into competition. I'm a real neophyte in it, but I have my hand grinder when I'm traveling and my AeroPress. What are some of the ways people can make coffee at home, and can it rival or ever be nearly as good as what you get in a good cafe?
Can you say that again, Dennis?
Yeah, the AeroPress, for instance,
Yeah,
you're
yeah,
having that competition. Can
that's
one
right.
expect to ever make a coffee that is as tasty, as good with the AeroPress or with a French press or any simple home device as one might get in a cafe that has a very expensive espresso machine?
I think that like it's so interesting because there's been such a focus the last 10 years. Like it's starting to now we are firstly really talking about beans, but like it's been like all of the focus on like, oh, that espresso machine, that,
Right.
capsule, that, it's been so very technical, like about what brew equipment, but so little focus have been like since, the last decade have been on the actual product, like, and
Hmm.
so that I find being so interesting at the moment, like that the focus is actually on the actual coffee. And then like, okay, would you buy a coffee from us and would you brew it at home with non-filtered water and not on a as even grinder and on a, would it be as good? No, of course not. But
Hmm.
it's also it's about the whole experience. I mean, that's what you do in your environment and like at home, and you're creating like it's a lot of other things that are also increasing your taste experience through like being
Right.
in that environment and doing your routines. And I absolutely like saying and talking about Ethiopia, and you sit there in front of a fire, like they have hand processed the cherries, roasting it over open fire directly, not like even grinding it, just like crunching it and then brewing it over a stove. Like it's just like it's not the best condition, but it tastes amazing. So I think that the main thing is just
Right.
like buy really, really tasty coffee and make sure you have a grinder.
Right.
And the AeroPress, I find like I love doing it outdoor when I'm traveling, like all of that. Like I can truly, it's not my absolute peak cups of the year, but I love the procedure and it's something very, very easy and fun. And it's a clean brewing method. Everything is like washed up and clean in,
Yeah,
one
no,
minute.
it's
Yeah.
also that's beautifully put, Joanna, and it's also the ritual. Like I know that I will never make a cup of coffee as good with my AeroPress or French press or whatever else I might be using, or a Chemex pour through as I will get at Drop Coffee. But the process is fun. It's just like if so I have a friend that loves fine wines and he knows a lot about it, and he makes his own wine. The wine he makes will never be as good as some of the fine wine he can buy, but boy, he really enjoys doing it. And if you notice yourself improving in terms of the quality of the coffee you're making, it's very fulfilling. So it's part, I guess, of the whole culture. Um, a couple of minutes left. I wanted to ask you a few other questions, and one is a little bit about your coffee roasting competition, where you represent Sweden and have done so fabulously well in the world competitions. Uh, what do they look for in terms of selecting champion roasters?
It's actually like a very strict score sheet we are following. So it's very little, like everything is done blindly, so they don't know who's doing what. They are, though, like controlling our technique, but that's not many points. Besides that, you're picking out, like in the raw coffee, you're picking out different defects, and you should be able to tell
Hmm.
what defect there is. You're measuring moist on the coffee. You will guess the weight in how much lost um, of moist you have lost throughout the roast. Um, but then it's like a roasting competition, as in who gets to roast the absolutely most tasty cup of coffee on the exact same machine on the same raw coffee.
Hmm.
And this is like, you create both a single origin and you create a blend. And you also must be able to describe, like, this one will have, like, I roasted it in such and such way with, like, a longer profile during the yellow and the brown stage, for example, and I'm aiming for milk chocolatey flavors and red apples and da da da. And you like it's also is like how well do you know the coffee you're roasting? Like it's not just like oh they appreciate it. You need to know your flavor notes. Like this is actually what I'm aiming for, and that's what's coming up out in the cup.
Great.
In the world,
Go ahead. Go ahead.
in the world though, it's so interesting because it really is this like the range you talk about, like from me roasting fairly considered light, and then you have like some super dark, and like it's not being judged per se on like roast level. Like it's not like all the light ones are doing better. It also is like what are you aiming to achieve and how well they manage to present it. So it's a very different culture. Talking about like South Korea and Japan happening, and they are just showing up in a team of 10 with suits, and somebody are training them and coaching them in raw coffee, one in how to do the training day, one to do the single, one to do the tasting notes, one to do the so like it's starting to get a very serious competition.
Wonderful. We have about 2 minutes left. I just want people to know where Drop Coffee is in Stockholm and where they can find you on social media.
Thank you. So welcome to Stockholm, everyone. You will find us at Mariatorget, the Maria Square in the Södermalm, so the southern part of town. We have a cafe there and serving all of the current coffees we're roasting. It's a principle I have. So everything is being served there, and a few metro stations away, or so the baristas can just bike over the bridge a little more south. We have the roastery in Midsommarkransen, the midsummer, wreath that you put in your head during midsummer. So there's the roastery where we have a 25 kilo dish.
Great.
And our social media is Drop Coffee Roasters.
Okay, so. dropcoffeeroasters.com. Google Drop Coffee Roasters. She's also on Instagram, or contact me directly, and I'll get you all this information. And I'm certainly looking forward. The next time I'm in Stockholm, that'll be my first stop, and not my last stop. I'll probably go there more than once. And really, just all the not just technology but art that goes into creating delicious coffee is wonderful. And Joanna is on the forefront of those people really directing that art and science of coffee making. So thank you so very much for taking the time to come on with us today.
Pleasure. Great pleasure. Thank
You're
you.
listening to KRUU LP 100.1 FM, the voice of Fairfield, Iowa, and beyond, the Midwest only solar-powered radio station, listener-supported. I am also found at Dennis.tv, and my other podcast, spiritmatterstalk.com. If you go to KRUUFM.com, I'll have about 500 shows there archived. So wonderful show. Thank you so much, and we look forward to having you on again sometime.
Likewise. I love that. Have a good cup of coffee now.
Oh, wonderful.